Today, we got Anna Kasparian crashing out on the Piers Morgan panel in reference to Israel. I'm going to let the intro play. I'm going to skip ahead to the panel debate. We're going to break it down every few minutes. Let's go.
I can't defend it. Okay, can you defend it? Hand on heart with all these Palestinians being slaughtered?
I laud and applaud them every day who have set a standard that will be virtually impossible for any Western country to match in a future war. This is a genocide that could be, alleged genocide that could be stopped at any point should the Hamas government decide to release the hostages.
To be proud of slaughtering 20,000 children? This is not human. I'm really sorry. Only the Nazis spoke like this.
Dozens of people get shot and killed literally every single day, as they're waiting for food. No, I'm not gonna let you filibuster, bitch. I find it so unbelievably evil.
Is Israel justified in defending the Druze in Syria?
Oh, absolutely not. And I don't believe for a second that they are. We're really supposed to believe that that's what's motivating them, yet we've seen 1,000 times more footage coming right next door in Gaza, and that hasn't motivated them to stop.
The UK's Foreign Secretary has described the current scenes in Gaza as sickening. 28 countries yesterday condemned Israel's, quote, horrifying attacks on Palestinians queuing for food. Pope Leo is demanding a ceasefire, expressing sorrow at what he calls barbarity. Far from finalizing a ceasefire, Israel has launched a massive new air and ground offensive on central Gaza, and every day more Gazans are being killed as they try to get food and water. 21 died in a crush on Friday. 39 were killed in gunfire near aid sites on Saturday. 67 were killed in gunfire as they waited for UN aid trucks on Sunday. Fewer than a quarter of Americans now say that Israel's actions are fully justified. 74% of Israelis told a recent poll they support a ceasefire which returns the hostages. Well, later on, we'll tackle the vexed debate about when a war becomes a genocide with Dave Smith. We'll begin with a simple question. How can Benjamin Netanyahu be stopped? Joining me is executive producer and host of The Young Turks, Anna Kasparian, the PragerU commentator and pro-Israel activist, Shabbos Kestenbaum, and the journalist and commentator for Haaretz, Gideon Levy. Well, welcome to all of you. Anna Kasparian, I mean, it's an important question, isn't it? As most of the world now watches in ongoing horror of what is happening in Gaza, which seems to have just gone way beyond any defensible proportionality to the events of October the 7th, horrendous though those were. But who is going to stop Netanyahu? It doesn't appear that President Trump is minded to do that. And if the Americans don't, I don't know who can.
Well, you do make a great point here, Piers Morgan, and it's the same point that I actually made on this very program not too long ago. The only person who has the ability to use his leverage to get Netanyahu to act differently is President Donald Trump. And for whatever reason, he seems ready and willing to supply arms to Israel, get dog-walked by the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. And quite frankly, not only is his actions and his enabling of these actions and this genocide in Gaza shameful for the American people, since we're being forced to fund it and pay for it, it's also embarrassing for the American people. We'd like to live in a sovereign country that has a government that represents the best interests of the American people. Instead, Donald Trump, along with other government officials, are facilitating the theft of our taxpayer money to buy bombs and other weapons that terrorize, slaughter, and maim innocent people, women and children in Gaza. It's unacceptable.
I appreciate her not screaming in her opening. I do want to address a chat real quick, which is, did you finally inmate me, Connor? And then you say, I'll take that as a no, laugh my ass off. Yeah, I mean, if you're asking if I banned or suspended you, no. All right. Casey says, I fucking hate Shabbos, dude, betrayed the Dems for Trump. Fuck that guy. Well, dude, this is the thing that I wanted to point out in the opening, is that I want to pick on Cenk Uygur real quick, where he's like, we defeated the establishment. So, you know, when Trump won, as much as a Republican won, I'm actually hopeful, because I'm really hoping that the populist right and the populist left can come together on some policies. And it's like, yeah, how do you feel about that now? You know, like, I hate to rub salt in a wound, but this whole like left-wing, right-wing horseshoe theory where you think you guys are going to come together, nah. You're going to come together for some of the stupidest projects in American politics, and then you're going to snap when it comes to things that are morally important. And I'm hoping that Anna Kasparian, and I'm hoping that Cenk Uygur, the people who have tried to close the horseshoe, I hope that they realize how much they were wrong to hope that Donald Trump would somehow be a vehicle for their success.
Okay, Shabbos Kestenbaum, I find it really difficult to see how any Israeli or Jew, frankly, around the world thinks that anything that's now happening in Gaza is going to make it more secure to be an Israeli or Jew. Because all I can see is the opposite happening, that there's just increasing rage, particularly in the Arab world, but also in the wider world. We're seeing it now with many allies of Israel. You know, I defended Israel's right to defend itself for a long time and got attacked for it all the time by people supportive of the Palestinian position. But I can't defend it now. Can you defend it? Can you honestly, hand on heart, defend what is happening on a daily basis with all these Palestinians being slaughtered at food sites? And don't just say it's all Hamas, because it's not.
Sure. So let's be clear. I do not defend the Israel Defense Forces. I laud and applaud them every day who have set a standard that will be
We're gonna have to fact check this, bro.
Virtually impossible for any Western country to match in a future war. In a dense urban environment, Israel has one of the lowest combatant to civilian ratios of modern warfare. Israel has actually given more aid into Gaza than pre-October 7th. This is a genocide that could be alleged genocide that could be stopped at any point should the Hamas government decide to release the hostages and surrender. This point has been made very clear by Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. This has been made clear by Benny Gantz. This has been made clear by Gideon Sa'ar. This war can end the minute Hamas surrenders and returns the hostages. In fact, there's a ceasefire deal on the table right now that Adam Boehler, who's the U.S. envoy for hostages, and Steve Witkoff have repeatedly offered to Hamas. That deal is on the table and has been on the table for the last 2 weeks. The only party that has rejected that ceasefire is Hamas. So if you truly want the killing to stop, if you truly want the war to end, if you truly want there to be a ceasefire, then you would use your platform. We would use campus activists to immediately put pressure on Hamas to surrender. The pressure should not be on Israel. Israel is engaging in a defensive war. I am proud of what Israel has done. Certainly, innocent civilians are being killed, which is a tragedy, but we do not judge the efficacy, the validity, or the justification on a war on.
So hold on. So we're actually, you guys can get pissed off, and that's totally fine. But what I want to show you right here is that if you look at your screens, the civilian casualty ratio in AI summary shows that it's pretty typical. There's one source that says that 90% of casualties will be civilians in urban warfare. However, it actually shows that the Battle of Mosul was 2-1. Kasled, which is Israel, is 2-1. Or approximately 1,400 to 1,500 Palestinians were killed, with around 50% reported as civilians. So that's 1-1. Protective Edge is 1-1. And right now we're dealing with 2-1. And then the Lebanon war, the siege of Beirut, was 6-1, but there were atrocities in there. So Iraq and Syria, 2017 to 2018, what would this be? Like ISIS or something, or counter jihadist warfare? 7,000 civilian casualties, accounting for 80% of all civilian loss of life. Okay, so I actually want to do civilian death ratio Hue City, because that was one of the most urban conflicts in the Vietnam War. So figures for Viet Cong losses were around 1,000 to 5,000. And then the civilians were around 6,000. So that's almost 1-1. And then civilian death ratio. We could do World War II. That would be funny. World War II. 70% of all deaths were civilians. So that's like 2-1, 3-1. So that's a World War II style casualty stat. And then, sorry, I'm going to check out one more. Civilian death ratio. Fallujah. In Fallujah during the battle, April to 24, estimates place civilian deaths at approximately 600 with an estimate of 200 insurgents killed. That's 2 to 1, 3 to 1. And that was the first operation. Then around 1,000 during the second battle, and then 1,200 insurgents killed. So that was 1 to 1. And by the way, for this casualty stat of 1 to 1, we had 6 months of preparation. So Israel's operations. This is where I get sorry. I'm gonna have to call out LB a little bit. So LB and a lot of other people are just screaming genocide, 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 genocide. Okay. However, based off of current stats, if we have 60,000 dead, 20,000 of whom are estimated to be combatants, and we have a 2 to 1 civilian death ratio, that's in line with World War II. It's a little bit higher than Hue City. It's a little bit higher than Fallujah, but Fallujah had 6 months of preparation first, where we literally hit the city with pamphlets saying, if you're a civilian, get out. If you're a civilian, get out. We're coming in. We're going to fight everybody. We're going to kill everybody. If you're a civilian, you need to get out. So that's what I'm saying is, like, you can say, well, in Fallujah, we had a 1 to 1 civilian combatant ratio, but that was with 6 months of prep. So yeah, sorry, genocide's not working for me. I'm not going to lie. We can say it's fucking horrific without saying it's a genocide.
How many civilians are being killed. That is not how you judge a war. No war has ever been judged. In the Korean War, 3 million civilians were killed.
True. We wiped out 25% of the North Korean population with aerial bombardment campaigns, which was horrific, by the way.
Iraq, more than 500,000 civilians were killed. In the Syrian civil war, 300,000 civilians were killed. Civilian death is always a terrible thing, but is a consequence.
Can you name me? All right, Shabbos. Can you name me? Name me a recent war since World War II where the proportion of children in civilian deaths has been this high. Can you just give me one?
I just did.
So the way that I feel like this is disanalogous, I'm sorry that I'm doing some Zion sweeping today. I know my Palestinian sympathetic friends are going to be pissed, but here's the thing. Like, what is it? 2/3 of Gaza's population is under the age of 18. Half of their population is under the age of 18. How many of Gaza's population is children or under 18? Children are half of Gaza's population. That's going to happen. That's like a weirdly high stat. How much of the United States is under 18? For comparison, we are at a quarter. So you can say, like, oh yeah, that's super fucked up. A bunch of people under the age of 18 are getting killed. And I agree with you. It is super fucked up. War's fucked up in general. However, Gaza has double the percentage of children compared to a Western developed nation.
Yeah, the Syrian civil war, the Korean war, the Vietnam war, any battle in Iraq, whether it was
you believe
Mosul,
the proportion of children to civilians killed was higher than it is right now in Gaza?
I just told you all of those wars, and you can fact check me all you would like. The reality is, and this is why you have John Spencer on repeatedly from West Point, Israel has one of the lowest combatant to civilian ratios in modern warfare. They're operating in a dense.
Yeah, but I've also had lots of military people who don't agree with it.
Where's your decency, man? Where is your decency?
Facts don't care about your feelings, Anna.
Seriously, where is your decency? Do you not see the videos? Do you not see the starving children? 19 kids.
Oh, never mind. I spoke too soon.
Died of starvation over the last 48 hours. Where is your decency? I get that you're Jewish. I get that this is about your identity. I get that you want to defend your people. But sometimes you can't defend the indefensible. How many people need to die for you to be pleased with this slaughter campaign that's currently going on? How many? Tell me. When is it enough for you?
Funny.
And no one is buying the lie that that the genocide would end if Hamas releases the hostages. I'm not going to believe for a second that Israel gives a damn about the hostages, because they've been bombing the Gaza Strip. They've been blocking humanitarian aid from entering the Gaza Strip. That not only impacts Palestinians who are being slaughtered by Israel, but it also obviously is going to impact the hostages. No one is buying this dog and pony show, okay? It's so obvious what Israel is doing here. They're even bombing Syria because they allegedly care about the Druze. It's not about the Druze. By the way, that Syrian civil war, Israel was part of that proxy war that you have Israel part of, the United States part of, Turkey a part of. All sorts of countries were involved in that proxy war.
And
it was absolutely horrific. And now, of course, Israel is taking full advantage of the situation to annex more land from Syria again. But
Well,
anyway,
okay.
continue. Tell me where your human decency
I
is.
have to
okay, just so this doesn't become the Israel simping hour, I think I've already made this clear before. I think that Gaza should be rebuilt. Effectively, there was what do you call them? I forget what you call them, but they're basically like the combat engineer Iraq operations. So combat engineers, in a way, in an attempt to gain local support, combat engineers would go do EOD operations, all that kind of stuff. But they would also build bridges, build schools, and all that kind of stuff. So what would happen was a bunch of Americans would show up, and they would be in armor, in uniform, and they would like build schools and shit. They would build water treatment facilities. And so effectively, they were just doing civilian operations where they were building military installations and building schools. And so effectively, this is exactly what I would do in Gaza, is I would close out a territory. I would make it so nobody was allowed in. I would build the perfect suburb with water, power, electricity, schools, colleges, a commercial district, etc. And then I would vet the Gazans and allow a corresponding, let's say that we let's say that we vetted 10% of the Gazan population and we built back 10% of the Gazan territory. You would let 200,000 people in, and then you would let them have a normal life and participate in a normal life and, you know, live in a nice house and go to school and do XYZ ABC. Is it going to be perfect? No. Are there going to be stabbings? Yes. Are there going to be shootings? Yes. Are there going to be suicide attacks? Yes. But that's better than just keeping 2 million people in squalor, in tents, letting them die of preventable disease, and then also just waiting for them to attack you again. So, and then slowly, 2%, 5%, 10% at a time, build and move the people back in so you can prove to them, we're not here to take your shit. We're here to basically say, let's get some peace, right? Let's get some peace. And if you did that, I would actually view that as like a pretty noble venture. Whereas if you just keep them in tents and just keep bombing them whenever they attack you, and you give them barely enough food to survive, and then people are dying of camp-related disease, like bad water and what's like the diseases that are common in a camp. Common diseases in a military camp, 19th century. Typhoid, malaria, dysentery, cholera, pneumonia, influenza. Yeah, if you just keep Palestinians in these kinds of conditions, yeah, I think you're a fucking asshole. Let's continue.
I have to say, as someone who grew up on the far left, actually watching you, Anna, and Cenk Uygur on the Young Turks, it's very, very sad for me personally to see just how far gone politically you have become.
I don't care.
Audible discharge is not, excuse me, stop interrupting. Audible discharge is not a usurpation of a coherent argument. You simply saying that I'm using my Jewish
Audible discharge. He's saying you just pooped out of your mouth, but that's not a coherent argument. Nice.
identity. This has nothing to do with my Jewish identity. It has to do with politics.
It is
has
about
to do
your
with
Jewish
war.
identity.
It has to do,
Literally,
okay,
everyone in the international community sees this for what it is, and you can't. You can't. How many people need to die?
You know, again, you are double my age. I encourage you to use the decorum of a 7-year-old and stop interrupting. You interrupt every other guest. Kindly just shut up.
No.
Now, here's the issue.
I don't care about decorum when we're talking about endless
all right, but you must let him answer.
That we're paying for.
All right, but Anna, look, you must let him answer.
Okay, go ahead.
So again, this question of how many civilians, no one asked that question in World War I. No one asked that question in World War II. No one asked that question in the Korean War. No one asked that question in the Vietnam War. No one asked that question in Iraq and Afghanistan, because
I think they asked it plenty in Iraq and Afghanistan, by the way.
you do not judge the efficacy, the validity, or the justification of a war depending on how many civilians are killed. If you truly want to end the killing of civilians, then I would urge you to use your platform and use the Young Turks to advocate for a ceasefire, the expurgation, the dismantlement of Hamas.
Don't tell me when to use the Young Turks for.
All right, let me go. All right, let me go to Gideon.
Give a voice to the voiceless,
hang on.
the powerless.
Okay.
Not the people who have all the power in the world and use it to slaughter innocent people.
Okay, let me.
Floki says, I was a combat engineer in Iraq. We didn't build those things. Well, sucks to suck. Maybe the cool ones did. Horizontal and vertical engineers did that. Combat engineers were fully on route clearance, anti-IED. What years, Floki? What years?
Come to Gideon. Be waiting. Let me come to Gideon, please.
Andy B says, I was a combat engineer. We worked with horizontal and vertical engineers. My battalion did 800 miles of road in Iraq. Based. Paul says, and build a McDonald's and a Pizza Hut. Yes. Bud123 says they don't want to rebuild any part of Gaza because they don't want them on Israel's borders. Otherwise, it would not be a Jewish state. What? They don't want to rebuild any part of Gaza because they don't want them in Israel's borders. Otherwise, it would not be a Jewish state. 20% of Israel is Palestinian Muslim, so that already doesn't make sense. And then not just that, even if you did an ethnic cleansing and moved all the Palestinians to Libya, you would still have Arab Muslims on your borders because you're next to Jordan, you're next to Saudi Arabia, you're next to Egypt, you're next to Syria, and you're next to Lebanon. I don't think your point is a point. But anyways.
Now, everybody knows how much I enjoy my
and I don't care about your commercials.
Gideon, it seems to me the problem with those like Shabbos trying to defend all this and saying how pleased they are with it all is that you've also got people like Smotrich in the Israeli government, the finance minister, one of the key members of that government, very openly talking now about a form of ethnic cleansing, where all the Palestinians, in his words, would be cleansed from Gaza. And this is clearly, it seems to me, becoming ever more obviously what the bigger plan may be here, which is that actually Israel's defense forces make it so uninhabitable, Gaza, by just blowing it all to pieces, that actually they say, well, you can't go back and live there to the Palestinians. You're going to have to all leave. And then they leave, and then Israel takes it over. I think that's exactly what people like Smotrich want. And that,
which is ethnic cleansing, by the way. Like, I understand that, like, a lot of people are like, well, shouldn't they ethnically cleanse so Israel can be safe? And I'm like, yeah, but that's ethnic cleansing, bro. Like, no, we should be able to figure out a peaceful solution where people can live side by side with some level of dignity, regardless of their religion. Now, I understand that Palestinians are part of the problem because West Coast Girl says that's not going to appease anyone, Connor. What they want is their own sovereign government. And unfortunately, that government wants to kill all Jews and wants the Jews to leave or die. Okay, well, in the famous words of some rock band that I don't remember the name of, you can't always get what you want, but sometimes if you try, you get what you need.
is not a form of self-defense to what happened on October the 7th. It's an ethnic cleansing of a population out of their homeland. What do you say to that?
Unfortunately, the problem is not Smotrich. Unfortunately, the problem is Israeli society, which is either support.
I have a question, Floki. That makes sense when you have horizontal and vertical engineers, lol. My question is, were those civilians or were those combat engineers? Because we worked with a shitload of contractors, obviously. So, Floki, are horizontal and vertical engineers, are they civilians or are they military folks?
Or quite passive and apathetical. Smotrich is the face of Israel, I'm afraid to say. He says loudly and in a very vulgar way things that you can understand from many, many other Israelis, maybe the majority, who sits at home, who doesn't watch anything of what's going on in Gaza, who has no interest in what's going on in Gaza, and sits, and then comes someone like our friend in the team now, who is even proud in it. Can you believe that a Jew, a human being, an American, can be proud of starvation, of mass murder, of genocide? I mean, this stage, really, here I remain speechless. I can understand if the Israeli propaganda tries to explain, to cover up, to spread lies, to talk about self-defense, to talk about killing Hamas, to talk about the fact that it's about Israel's security. But to be proud of what we are doing, to be proud of slaughtering 20,000 children, how can a human being get out those words out of his mouth? This is not human. I'm really sorry. Only the Nazis spoke like this. I repeat, only the Nazis were proud of mass killing and genocides.
We had two companies of horizontal and vertical engineers, military, who worked with the contractor sometimes. Well, no offense, Floki. No offense. So I have a strong suspicion that because the Marine Corps is fairly small, we had some combat engineers, right? But we probably referred to all engineers who were military as combat engineers. So that probably is some like technocratic, like, so for instance, like I wouldn't get offended if somebody referred to me as a supply guy, right? But there's like a few supply guys. There's the admin guys, which is what I was. There was the warehouse guys, which was like the 51s. And then there was the like headquarters guys who were like a different MOS, but effectively they just oversaw the reporting. They were in like S1 and they oversaw the supply reporting. Now, if the S1 guy got called a supply guy, maybe he would be offended. But realistically, he just oversaw the reports coming out of supply. You know what I'm saying? So if you had horizontal and vertical engineers who were military guys who could see combat, you know, forgive me for referring to them as, in general, combat engineers.
Okay, well, Shabbos, you should respond to that.
Sure, I'm certainly not proud of mass starvation because there isn't any. I'm proud of the fact that
hang on. The IDF literally, for 3 months, starved the population in a blockade. There was no secret about that. Everybody saw it for what it was. So I'm afraid you're just not right about that. They only recently ended that blockade. So they are starving the population, which is, by the way, a war crime if you do that.
Piers, do you know how many meals the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation?
Oh, spare me all this. It's just crap. It's like when I did a list, honestly. Shabbos, I did a list, Shabbos. I did a list.
It's 85 million meals. If you're trying to starve a population, why would you give them 85 million meals in the last month and a half?
I know. They're all overfed.
Why would you give them 85 million meals in the last month and a half?
I know. They're all
85 million is a lot, by the way, because you have to figure if that's dried stuff, if that's rice, 85 million, and they have a population of around 2 million, divide by 2, 3 meals a day, 14 days. That's only 2 weeks, though. That's only, correct me if I'm wrong. So we got 85 million meals divided by 2 million people. Divide by 7 days in a week, although I guess that's days. Divided by three because 3 meals in a day. Yeah. So that's only like 85 million is a big number, right? Like I'm not trying to knock on the 85 million. 85 million is a shitload of food aid. I'm sure it was a shitload of bags, et cetera, et cetera. It was a lot of food. However, that's 2 weeks worth of food, and there was a blockade for 3 months. So how do you reconcile that stat? And by the way, if it seems like I waffle back and forth, it's because I think that these people have been endlessly watching videos of Palestinian teenagers getting blown apart by bombs. But I accept the counter propaganda from this guy that the civilian to combatant death ratio is approximately appropriate for modern combat. If Fallujah and Hue City had similar stats, then I think that's about normal, right? Which is gross. Obviously, people dying is horrific. But then I'm going to call out the propaganda as well, where if if Gaza had a 3-month blockade and then was given 2 weeks worth of food, that's not really something to pat yourself on the back over, right? That means that you're giving them just enough to not die.
I know.
Is there more aid going into Gaza post October 7th than pre October 7th? I cannot name another war in
and you know the
war
problem, Shabbos?
The besieged population is actually receiving aid from the enemy combatants. That is what I'm proud of.
It's amazing. Look, Shabbos, here's the thing. Unfortunately, you sound like the people who have started to defend the indefensible when it comes to what Israel's government is doing. And I'll tell you why. After all these attacks on Palestinians as they're queuing up for food, the IDF says basically the same thing. Either they were firing warning shots, or they felt they were being threatened by some people, or they've launched an inquiry or an investigation. And we never get the results of any of this. But in the meantime, 1,000 people who are desperately hungry and are queuing for food, even though you say they've got plenty of food, there are thousands stampeding for the small amounts of food that they can get their hands on, even though you say they're not hungry because you've overfed them, right? That all these people are just...
Yeah, which is crazy. It's crazy to keep people in conditions like this without a game plan to get them out of those conditions. That's what I find crazy.
Dropping dead. And it's got nothing to do with the fact the IDF are firing towards them, when everybody knows it does. And this is the problem when you defend the indefensible. It would have so much more credibility if the IDF just once said, you know what, we did. We shot at them, and like you said, you're very proud of everything they're doing. And if they were to proudly own this and explain why they need to shoot starving people who are stampeding for fragments of food, maybe we'd all take a lot more seriously the other claims they make. And the other point I'd make, Shabbos, is when you now just tell me I'm talking nonsense and they're all overfed and no one's getting killed and it's all on Hamas. To this day, the Israeli government refuses to let any international media into Gaza. And it's not because of the quaint notion that they're worried about the safety of journalists, because they've killed over 200 Palestinian journalists. They don't care about the health and safety of journalists, and it's not their business to decide about the safety requirements of journalists. It's the business of the organizations that employ them. But until Israel's government allows foreign media into Gaza to verify its endless, in my opinion, utterly disingenuous statements, then no one should believe a word they're now saying. Because why should we? Why should we? Why should we believe anything that the Israeli government is saying about any of this when they don't want the world's media to see it? After October the 7th, what was the first thing they did? They brought the world's media into the kibbutzes to see the full horror of what Hamas did, to verify the truth. But they won't apply that same thinking to verifying the truth in Gaza. And as a journalist, I know why they don't want to do that. They don't want people to see the truth. They're hiding the truth. That enables them to lie with impunity and to discount any responsibility for anything they're doing. And if I sound angry about this, it's because I'm bloody angry about it. Because it's so obvious that they don't want people to see the truth. And you can sit here and you can say till you're blue in the teeth, there's nothing going on that's wrong. There's nothing to see here. It's all on Hamas. No one's starving anyone. No one's shooting anyone in food aids. No one's...
So he's kind of bloviating, but the steel man here from the IDF perspective would be, we have to have control over the food aid distribution because, as somebody brought up in chat, there's the accusations that Hamas is effectively hoarding the food and then using that for political power, which is very common, by the way, in starvation situations, is hoarding the food and then distributing it to the civilians or whatever so they can shore up power within the conflict. And then also the argument would be, well, tens of thousands of people stampeding you. Yeah, you can have a rifle, but if tens of thousands of people start punching you in the face simultaneously or knocking you to the ground or running you over or whatever, you can just as easily die from a stampede as you can like a shotgun. So the point would be they have to maintain control over the stampede. So, you know, I find it pretty gross and pretty repugnant. But what I would say is, I give you my solution from earlier. Floki points out Oh, I know why you Marines call them all combat engineers, because it's tasked for labor. Your vertical, horizontal were Seabees, which are Navy personnel, by the way. I always forget that Marines are locked at the Navy's hip. Yep.
Doing anything wrong. This is the most moral army in the world. Well, okay, so let the journalists in and we can see for ourselves just how true that all is.
So after listening to that disquisition, let me say this. You're certainly entitled to your opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. I agree with you. The Israel Foreign Ministry and the Israel Defense Forces should let journalists like yourself, Piers, not only into Gaza, but also into the Kerem Shalom border crossing. So you can see with your own eyes, the way I have seen, the more than 800 humanitarian aid trucks that were going into Gaza on a daily basis. I never once said that
why
there's
are they
no
stampeding for food? If they're so overfed, why are they stampeding for food?
Piers, I defend you constantly. You are not an anti-Semite, obviously, but I do understand why people have trepidation coming on your show, because they allow you to speak for 5 minutes, and the moment I try to make a point, you interrupt. So if you allow me just 2 minutes to make my point, and then you can tell me why.
Just make your point.
Okay.
Just make your point. Stop crying about it.
No, that's a valid thing to say. It's fine. I don't want to keep interrupting people. That's fine. Go on.
I appreciate it. Let me say as follows. I agree with you. Journalists should be allowed into Gaza. I imagine, though, the Israeli position is, well, we can't allow journalists into Gaza because if the accusations from individuals like Piers Morgan or Anna Kasparian is that we are killing journalists indiscriminately, and then journalists were to end up being killed because Gaza is an active war zone, you can imagine what that would do on the PR front. Never mind the fact that British military rule does not allow journalists into active combat zones. So what you are saying is we should apply a double standard to Israel, that they need to allow journalists into an active war zone, but no other Western country needs to follow the same procedures. Even with that double standard, I would concede that point. I agree journalists should be allowed in.
What if you could delay your next 2 mortgage payments? That's right. Imagine putting those 2 payments in.
As for starvation, I never once said that people are being overfed. I never once said that what the IDF is doing inherently all the time is good. What I am saying is the IDF has taken measures that no other Western country has ever taken in modern warfare. The fact that they drop leaflets on buildings telling civilians to evacuate because there are known Hamas entities in those buildings. The fact that they have provided more aid into Gaza post-October 7th than pre-October 7th is something I'm very proud of. And if you believe that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is not doing enough,
the fact that they shoot at people as they're waiting in line for humanitarian aid. Dozens of people get shot and killed literally every single day, as they're waiting for food. No, I'm not going to let you filibuster, bitch. I'm not going to let you filibuster. I'm not going to let you filibuster. You guys are totally okay with IDF soldiers shooting and killing desperate people waiting for humanitarian aid. You're okay with that. I find it so unbelievably evil. Unbelievably evil. It shocks my conscience and my soul that people as evil as this exist in this world. Okay, watching these images, looking at these videos, seeing all these kids desperate, hungry, parentless, trapped in Gaza, and you're sitting here and you're defending it. I can't stand it. I can't listen to it. The filibustering is
Then why are you there? If you can't listen to it, why are you there? And why can't you contend with the point? So the point that I would be making is, what's the next step? That would be my point. Would be, what's the next step? So okay, so let's say, even if we concede all of this stuff, which we don't have to concede anything that the Israeli gentleman is saying. However, what we could say is, all right, let's say all of that's true. What's next? Okay, are we just going to keep them in tents, in camps, reliant on not stampeding for food every day, handed food by IDF forces? Is that the long-term game plan? What's next?
unbearable. It's unbearable.
And what
It's unbearable. I can't take it. How can you watch all those kids die?
Okay, let me bring Gideon back in.
Hey, Casey, I'm gonna say this. Chill the fuck out, okay? Number one, you're doing the memes about like Israel can do nothing wrong. I'm taking those as jokes. I'm taking those as memes. And then didn't Anna have relations with a homeless guy? No, she was sexually assaulted by a homeless guy. I don't think that's funny. Go say that in DGG. They'll fucking think it's a riot. I don't think that's funny at all. I think that's actually pretty fucked up.
Will you call on Hamas right now to surrender and release the hostages? Do it. Do it right now. Say, I
called out Hamas. I called out Hamas from the very beginning. I've got no love for Hamas. It's a terrorist organization.
You're peaking, Anna. Take her down about 20%.
What they did was wrong. I cried over the atrocities that they engaged in on October 7th. But you know what's so disgusting? You want to? Yes, I did. You should watch The Young Turks. That's where you'll see exactly what I had to say about Hamas after October 7th. I even trashed elements of the left who refused to criticize Hamas for what they did. Okay, so you don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to that issue.
Okay, you made that clear.
But you can't on one hand,
all right.
You can't on one hand talk about the injustice of what Hamas did and then turn around and say it's okay if Israel does it times 1,000.
Okay, let me bring Gideon back in here. Gideon, my big issue, other than the slaughter of so many civilians now, which seems to be almost accelerating now on a daily basis, with no control valve at all. Now we have a full new wave of ground invasion. God knows how many more civilians are going to get killed with this. But my real problem is, what is the supposed goal here, right? I believe Smodrich when he said,
"It's all good, Casey. I parasocially love you. Just, you know, little bit too far." That's more of a DGG joke, okay? This is CGG or COG. But anyways, quick shill in the middle of the moral frogging. This is not my favorite kind of content, by the way. I know that yelling and screaming and crying oftentimes gets the clicks, and, you know, I'm happy to be creating it. I'm happy to be your streamer of choice today. However, I actually like to, I don't know, try to pull out the better ideas from trash. And it's kind of hard when we're just screaming. So if I was to summarize this as best I can, Anna Kasparian and this guy are shocked that Israel can defend what it's doing in Gaza. And this guy is saying, well, on the scale of things, this actually isn't that bad. That seems like the argument so far. Now, for me, though, quick shill. Like the stream, engage with chat. Lots of funny, interesting, messed up people in chat who make plenty of messed up jokes and interesting observations. Super chats if you got them. Memberships if you got them. I'm trying to think of what else. Watch the VODs, engage with the VODs, click on the VODs. VODs will be posted to Counterpoints Politics. If you're not subscribed over there, type in Counterpoints, common spelling, politics, common spelling into your search bar. Subscribe to that channel. Watch the old videos that you missed the live streams on. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. Love you. Parasocially. Let's go.
As he wants to cleanse Gaza of Palestinians. Okay. But how does any of this make Israel safer? How does any of this help Jews around the world who want to get on with their lives and not have to feel threatened when they walk out of their front door? How does any of this do anything but what the critics of it, including allies and friends of Israel, say is just fomenting the hatred, fomenting the ideology that Israel just wants to kill all the Arabs it can, which I don't believe is what they want to do at all. But I do believe that out of what happened October the 7th, there's been a collective meltdown of common sense from Israel's government. And they're now just on a never-ending rampage with no apparent goal, which makes any sense to anybody else.
Here we differ, Piers. I used to think like you until the recent weeks. Now I'm so deeply convinced that there is a goal, a very clear goal. And the goal is the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. It is systematic. It is well planned. And listen to what.
True zealot. My finger twitches towards the X button in my browser every time it says CGG. Just seems to be trigger my disgust reflex. Why? Why? VGG is Vash's community. What is it? DGG is Destiny's community. Why am I not entitled to a community? It was promised to me 3,200 years ago that I would have a community. True zealot.
What I have to say, all the Holocaust in history started with moving populations and concentrating them in one concentration camp. Israel is doing it by the time we are talking now. Secondly, Israel is destroying the Gaza Strip systematically. It's not anymore a building here, a headquarters there, a school here, a shelter there. No. It's systematic destruction with huge companies who do it for a lot of money. Destruction of Gaza.
COG is better. The community of grill hottists, the cabal of grill hottists, the core of grill hottists. True.
Gaza, which will make it unlivable. We want Gaza to become unlivable in order that the Palestinians.
All right, the COG. The COG it is.
Palestinians will leave Gaza. Stop thinking that there is no goal. The goal is crystal clear now. I don't know if it will be achieved, but it is crystal clear, and it's not Smotrich. It's not only Smotrich. It's the army, it's the government, it's big parts of Israeli public opinion to destroy Gaza, make it unlivable, to push them to the southern part of the Gaza Strip, to put them in concentration camps in which they will be longing to the days that they were starving in the Muasa and in other places, because life there will be much more of the hell. And then, according to the plan, and they said it, whoever will want to leave will be able to leave to other countries. So we are watching, by the time we are talking now, a horrible plan, a satanic plan of ethnic cleansing of Gaza. There is a goal, it's very clear, and the world has to do something immediately to stop it before it will be too late.
So this is my question, though, because I understand this from a moral level. Like I said, I think the correct thing is to rebuild Gaza and give it back to the Gazans. That way you can say, hey, we're not planning on ethnically cleansing you. We're not planning on moving you from the territory. As a matter of fact, we're going to give you a decent life in this territory. However, please stop bombing the shit out of us. Here's a decent standard of living. I think that would be the moral thing to do, okay? There's plenty of undeveloped. Look at this. We're going to do a map of Israel. Quick geopoll time, okay? Israel maps. Israel does have a healthy chunk of desalination plants because there isn't a lot of fresh water here, and a majority of the fresh water, I think, is trapped in this territory, right, by the River Jordan. And so where's the border for the West Bank? I'm looking for the West Bank border. This is the West Bank border. All right. Anyways, point being that you have an okay amount of access, although this does look dried up. This part of the river looks dried up. But anyways, the point is there's plenty of territory to design or to cultivate and develop here. And what I mean by is, like, I'm sure like 80 to 90% of the Israeli population lives in these urban centers west of Jerusalem. I'm sure that's like 90% of the population. But the truth is, there's nothing really stopping you from pumping in water into this territory from a desalinization plant and then just making Beersheba or Revavim or Tialim or Yeruhem or Damona or Ariara or Kesefa. There's plenty of territory here. And if you pumped in the water, you could increase the population substantively for Israel without necessarily annexing the territory of Gaza or annexing the territory of the West Bank. There's still plenty of room. Oh, the Dead Sea's probably salty, isn't it? So you probably need desalinization. But anyways, the point is that there's not a lot of water, but you can make it happen. And so Israel has plenty of room to grow without annexing. So why not? And I think the answer is clear. The Palestinians, we just looked it up earlier. The Palestinians don't want a one-state solution. 40% of them, two-state solution. Only 40% of the Palestinians ever supported a two-state solution, at least from some cursory research that we did earlier. I think it was like in the 70s and then dropped down to 40 and then it dropped down to 24. So that last statement, scratch the last statement. I think there was a 70% support for a two-state solution at one point, then it dropped to 40, then it dropped to 24. But the whole point is, Israel can still internally develop. The West Bank can internally develop. Gaza can internally develop. They just don't want to. At which point the international community goes, fuck it, it's your problem. So what international force is going to solve this? The United States isn't going to do it. The UN has no teeth. So I guess we're just screwed. I guess we just have to watch it happen.
Shabbos, would you like to see the Palestinians out of Gaza? Do you agree with Smotrich?
Absolutely not. And I'm very proud of the fact that when I was living in New York City, I drove 4 hours to Washington, D.C. pre-October 7th to protest Bezalel Smotrich. Bezalel Smotrich represents a fringe minority of the Israeli populace. One of the trade-offs of living in a democracy, which of course Gaza is not, Iran is not, Syria is not, Lebanon is not, Jordan is not. Israel is the only democracy. And one of the trade-offs is you live with individuals who have reprehensible views. That's what living in a democracy is all about. And I'm thankful that individuals like Bezalel Smotrich are not part of the war cabinet. When you talk about what are the stated aims of the war,
Melody says the issue is how do you stop them from trying to kill you and your people constantly during all this time? What, of rebuilding Gaza or developing internally? I think you just have secure borders and strong border controls. I think that's it. And then I also think that you do, like my plan to redevelop the Gazan district or whatever. I think you do that as a sign of good faith. Like, hey, we're not trying to steal your territory. Here's a decent standard of living. And then if that doesn't work, then you kill them. You know what I'm saying?
The prime minister has stated them numerous times. Right now, an American citizen, Omer Nutra, an American citizen, Itai Chen, their bodies are being held by Hamas in captivity. So when you ponder, well, what are the goals of the war? They're very simple, and they've been repeated on national television since October 7th. Give back the hostages, both the living ones and the ones you have killed, and force Hamas into exile. And instead of putting the pressure on the dictatorial Islamic regime that have obliterated any chance the Palestinians have of freedom of movement, freedom of expression, their own state. Instead, you put pressure on the individuals who are responding to an actual genocide that occurred on October 7th when Hamas tried to kill every last Jew they could find. I believe in a two-state solution. I believe and I want Palestinians to have their own state in the same way that Jews have their own state. The problem is there is one entity that does not believe in that, and that is the entity that is calling from the freeing of Palestine of all Jews from the river to the sea. So if you are pondering, if you are asking, what are the stated aims? Give back the hostages. Can someone please explain why Hamas has the bodies of Thai hostages, why they took Africans, why they took babies? No one can articulately make a rational claim for that, and no one can articulately make the claim as to why Hamas thought it would be a good idea to slaughter innocent civilians on October 7th and then assume there would not be any military response.
Well, no, I think you're missing what I would say. Well, hang on.
Piers, let me just say one sentence.
Yes, please do. Get in.
The atrocities of the 7th of October were horrible. I was there the next day. I saw it in my own eyes. I will never forget it. Ever since then, Israel committed 1,000 7th of October. You understand it? 1,000 7th of October Israel committed. The children, if you take the numbers, the figures, the way that they are being killed, you see that we cannot claim again and again about the 7th of October and justify with the 7th of October all those horrible crimes against humanity which are taking place. There is a stage in which this is unacceptable anymore. You cannot again and again try to remind us about the terrible things that happened on the 7th of October and the 20 living hostages. You know that every 6 minutes, every 6 hours, Israel is killing 20 people? And they are as innocent as the hostages, among them many children. So stop with the 7th of October.
Then release the corpses of the hostages. You know what I'm saying? You don't need them corpses. And why does Hamas have to stay in power? That's the other thing that I don't understand. Like, if the government that I was a part of led us into military and economic disaster, wiping out 80% of the standing structures of the community I lived in, killed 10% of the population, and then was still militarily holding out and perpetuating the suffering of my people, I don't know how I would be able to continue to support that government. They fought a war and they lost. They fought a war and they got their shit kicked in. Why would you continue to support Hamas after this? Why isn't there a new Palestinian government?
Acceptable to rely only on this and to say the 7th of October enable us to go crazy and to do those crimes. And second point, stop speaking about Smotrich. The concentration camp in Rafiah is the idea of Israel Katz, Minister of Defense, nothing to do with Smotrich. Netanyahu let all this happen. It's not Smotrich. The idea of the humanitarian center or city, whatever, is clearly a stage on the way to transfer them. They say it, not I say. They say that they will be able to get out of this concentration camp only if they move to another country. This is ethnic cleansing, and it's not Smotrich. It is the...
Oh yeah, if we're talking about civilian combat rate or civilian to combat ratios, I think it was 3-to-1. So if you're talking about like civilian to combat ratios in civilian to combatant combat ratios in conflict, Not only do you have the videos of Hamas terrorists specifically looking at civilians and then shooting them right in between the eyes because it was on purpose. These civilians weren't collateral damage. How many IDF soldiers? All right. How many people died total on October 7th? It's 1,200 people. How many IDF soldiers died on October 7th? So 800 of them approximately were civilians. And 400 of them were security forces. So let's go ahead and bust that out. I think it's already a 3-to-1 ratio. So 400 divided by 1,200 is 33%. So it's a 2-to-1. It's a 2-to-1. Well, actually, you know what? That's why they're complaining. They're complaining because the same ratio of civilians is dead with IDF response. Okay, well, on scale, the IDF is killing more people, but in ratio, they're killing the same. That's kind of horrific.
The Israeli government, the whole government behind it.
Shabbos, just to be clear, if it turns out that is indeed what this Israeli government is moving to do, and they do attempt to expel all the Palestinians out of Gaza, would you categorize that as a war crime? And would you say that Netanyahu and the others responsible should then be tried in The Hague?
Piers, let me be clear. If there is a forced permanent displacement of the Palestinian people, I will gladly go back on your show to denounce it. However, what the co-panelists are...
That doesn't count for a lot, buddy. Like denouncing it after the fact. The reason why I think Anna and this dude are probably correctly pissed at this guy is denouncing it after the fact does nothing, right?
Distinguishing, or excuse me, what they're blurring is what has been done in every single war fought in modern warfare and with what Israel seeks to be doing now, which
West Coast points out that there were protests against Hamas, which is incredibly brave because it effectively means that you could get smoked. And I think Hamas actually did kill some of their critics.
which apparently is ethnic cleansing. If you truly believe, as my co-panelists have suggested, that the Palestinian people are facing a genocide, if you truly believe that they're experiencing a discriminate bombardment, then you would do everything in your power to ensure that the innocent civilian population are safely evacuated temporarily so that Israel can kill the terrorists who have embedded themselves in civilian populations, like schools, like hospitals, like nursing homes. The problem is every time Israel or Western countries suggest doing that, suggest moving a refugee population the same way we have moved any refugee population, it's called ethnic cleansing. So then the alternative, okay, but then you would have civilians living in a dense urban environment where they are exposed to warfare. And then they die because that happens as a consequence of starting a war you have no hope of losing. So it's sort of a catch-22.
No hope of winning, but I understand what he's saying.
Either we can safely evacuate them to Egypt, which, by the way, also shares a border with Gaza and has zero interest in taking the Palestinian population, or we can say, well, if you're not willing to safely evacuate them into humanitarian corridors, then you are exposing them to danger in warfare. But it seems like my co-panelists are suggesting that is preferable. That, to me, is something I cannot understand. That is not rational. That is not liberal. That is not justified. We should safely evacuate civilians, take out Hamas and the dictatorial tyrannical regime, and then once the war is finished, you can safely repopulate Gaza with the same civilian population and build Gaza into what it was meant to be when Israel left Gaza in 2005, which again, to your point of ethnic cleansing, Israel is doing a pretty shitty job of ethnic cleansing when A, there are more Gazans post-October 7th alive than there were pre-October 7th, and B, Israel has given up Gaza in 2005. They gave up the Sinai Peninsula in 1979. They have consistently given up land in the name of peace. You know how much land the other Arab nations have given up? Zero, because their starting position from 1948 was the eradication of the Jew from the river to the sea. And that's what the root of this conflict is all about, is the inability of the Palestinian leadership to...
Listen, I don't sympathize with everything Israel does, but I do think that there needs to be there has to be something to be said, okay? Where in 48, in 67, in 73, in 2023, some Arab militant force attacks Israel, then Israel kicks the shit out of them, and then it's incumbent upon Israel in order to make peace. You know what I'm saying? We call on Israel to make peace and to be civilized and to engage in diplomacy because it's the 20th century. But you understand that if Israel did this shit 200 years ago, nobody would give a fuck, right? Like, I'm not trying to be so crass about it. Obviously, like, evil before the age of media is still evil. Like, Genghis Khan killing tens of millions of people is still evil. I'm not trying to, like, you know, sweep for the crimes of the past. But the truth is that, like, in 1850, this would have been just another day. You know, like, people would read a newspaper clipping and they'd be like, oh, that's still going on? And that would be the total level of emotional reaction. I actually think that a substantive amount of this conflict is because we have cell phones and video cameras that are capable of seeing the violence as it occurs. And so it's horrifying to us. But I think that this was probably happening in the 2000s. This was happening during the 82 Lebanon war. This happened during the 73 war. This happened during the 67. This happened during the 48. This happened during the Mandate of Palestine. All of this stuff was still going on. We can just see it.
Recognize the fruitfulness of coexistence and peace. I believe in coexistence and peace. I believe the war should end. No, who doesn't?
Okay.
Are you going to let him filibuster?
All right, final word to Anna.
The same. Okay, a final word to me. Thank you. I appreciate that. If this was really about getting the hostages back, then Israel wouldn't be raining terror on the Palestinians in the West Bank, which is a separate territory, which was not governed by Hamas, but they are raining terror on them. They're allowing these terrorist settlers to run Palestinians out of their homes.
There you go. That's where I think it's a slow rolling ethnic cleansing. I'm with Anna on this part, at least.
They're bulldozing homes. They're building additional illegal settlements. They're openly talking about annexing the West Bank, by the way. So all of these talking points are so easy to dismantle. Why should Egypt clean up your mess? Why doesn't Israel absorb the Palestinian people in Tel Aviv or some other part of Israel if they're so?
Probably because they just got done decapitating and murdering and raping people, Anna. I think you know the answer to this question. I think you're being obtuse.
Concerned about civilians getting killed. It's because they're not concerned about civilians getting killed. They do want to ethnically cleanse. They want to force Egypt, which, by the way, is having overpopulation issues of its own, to absorb a problem.
What? Egypt birth rate. Oh, shit. Good for you, Egypt. 2.88 demographic replacement. Good for them. Wow. Egypt's cooking. Egypt's cooking with the babies. That's bananas. Wow. Good for you.
That was created by Israel and the United States. And no one is under this ridiculous impression that this would just be a temporary relocation of the Palestinian people. Why did Benjamin Netanyahu use the Greater Israel map in the very beginning of this genocide? Publicly during a press conference? He did it because this is all about the Greater Israel Project. He believes.
Dude, I love that this was an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory like 10 or 20 years ago. If you talked about, like, and by the way, like, I'm actually okay with politics normalizing criticisms of like Israeli expansion and dissolution. I'm sure it's been that way for a really long time. But I think in the 1990s, there was this like historical revisionism when it came to American greatness, and Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers was a part of that, which, by the way, phenomenal films and TV shows. But effectively with Saving Private Ryan, you had this valorization of the World War II generation where they were like superhuman, not superhuman, but they were very relatable. And they were dealing with, oh, by the way, here's Malcolm Reynolds. Here's my favorite actor in the world, who might be a douchebag, but he's pretty cool. But effectively, you had like a very humanizing tale of World War II and what it was like to be in World War II, and, you know, fighting the good fight against the Germans and how like vicious warfare was. And then with HBO, what was it? Band of Brothers. With Band of Brothers, not only did you have this like heroic narrative of normal dudes dealing with like the insanities of World War II combat, but you also have it kind of ending where they discover the concentration camp. And one of the most like heart-wrenching moments of Band of Brothers was when they actually had to stop feeding the concentration camp victims, and they had to put them back in the concentration camp because they were afraid that if they let them go, the concentration camp victims would eat so much food that they would kill themselves. They would actually give themselves shock. Band of Brothers concentration camp scene. So we have this total narrativization of World War II where not only were our grandparents like total fucking heroes, but they ended, you know, some of the most horrific conditions possible for disproportionately Jewish people. And so as a result, there was this like heroic narrative. But with that heroic narrative also came like a total lack of criticism of Jews in the state of Israel. So if you said Greater Israel Project in 1995, if you said Greater Israel Project in 2004, people would have thought you were a fucking Nazi, 100%. And yeah, it took me like 5 minutes to fucking say it, but the point is that I do think it's weird, but better for discourse that effectively 2005 Nazi talking points are being discussed on mainstream media. I think we have to have the conversation. You have to debunk the Greater Israel Project, and you can't just say, "Oh, you're being anti-Semitic." You know, that's not a good enough of a defense anymore.
First of all, he's totally against the Oslo Accords, has been from the very beginning. There are videos of him from when he's in his like 20s talking about how the Palestinians should not be allowed to have their own state, their own right to self-determination. We're not stupid, Shabbos, okay? We're not idiots.
Jesus. Dude, this is all right. So this is how you spell Anna Kasparian. ANAKASPARIAN. We need to change that shit to Anna Kasparian with a Y. Fucking holy shit. She said, we're not that dumb, Shabbos. And correct me if I'm wrong. Shabbos meaning, holy shit, it's the Sabbath. It's the Sabbath. Yeah. Shabbos Goy. Shabbos Goy. This is so funny. This is the most anti-Semitic shit I've heard on a panel in a minute. So a Shabbos Goy is a non-Jewish person who performs tasks forbidden to observant Jews on the Sabbath. These tasks often involve things like turning on lights or appliances, are prohibited on the Sabbath by Jewish law, but non-Jews are not bound to those restrictions. And so a Shabbos Goy is effectively what?
A toast to the engaged couple.
Is this a love story between the AT&T girl and the Goy guy who
Some may have doubted this day would come.
Oh no. What is this? Oh no. What's happening? Why is the AT&T girl? What is she doing? What is happening? I'm so worried. Oh, is he gay?
So you need me to turn Damien.
I can't shake.
Germs?
Juice.
So you need me to turn off whatever's in here?
As a couple, you set the spiritual bar for your union.
Who's this?
That is the craziest shit I've ever seen. What the fudge? Wow. Okay. I'm sorry. ADD just took us on a totally different adventure. I went from making jokes about Anna Kasparian should be spelled Aryan to denote her Nazi talking points to watching a trailer about the AT&T girl needing to turn off her vibrator using a gay man so she doesn't disappoint her observant Jew family. What just happened? Ugh. You know that thing where you like fall asleep at the wheel and then you like wake up, like not like asleep, but you've been driving for 20 minutes and you kind of daydream and then you realize that you've made it 20 minutes down the road and you have no memory of actually driving that 20 minutes. That's what just happened to me, except for I fell down the AT&T girl vibrator Jewish comedy thing. What just happened? That was terrifying. All right. Anyways, Anna Kasparian. She's a Nazi now. Lol. Joke. Ha ha ha.
See it clearly. You can say whatever you want to say, and the same talking points are regurgitated over and over again. We're not buying it because we can see the facts on the ground. And Gideon Levy, let me just say to you, God bless you. Thank you so much for speaking out, because I know that there are people out there who have the wrong impression of the Israeli people overall. And I'm talking about civilian people. But there are wonderful Israelis. There are people who have the humanity in their hearts and their souls. They see what's happening. They're against it. Wonderful Jews all over the world, including here in the United States, who are protesting against the atrocities that are being committed against the Palestinian people. So thank you, because it's important for people like you to speak out, to at least provide a counter to the narratives and the lies that provide cover for the slaughter that we're seeing right now in Gaza. So thank you.
Well said.
Thank you so much.
Oh, that's his name. Okay. It's still going in the thumbnail, but that's his name. Okay, cool. I didn't know that this guy's name was Sabbath. That's interesting.
Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Well, many influential people have been tagging both me and Dave Smith over the past few days, demanding to know why.
All right, I don't need to watch Dave Smith. Fuck Dave Smith. Oh, Sacred Snow, what the fuck is this? Dude, I don't know. I blacked out, man. Hold on. I'm going to play a very small clip for you. It's going to show you the experience of what just happened. Old school, I blacked out. So you're at a debate. They have to talk about economics. Nobody knows what the hell they're talking about. And then Frank actually does like a perfect speech about economics. This is me coming out of the AT&T girl rant.
Human resource development. Thank you.
That was me coming out of that segment, bro. That was brutal. All right, hold on. Let's wrap that up, okay? Let's wrap that up, and then I'm going to engage with chat real quick. So, that hurt. All right. So let's engage with what was said. Shabbos apparently is his name. He came on to defend Israel. He did so with stats and logic, and facts don't care about your feelings, which is fine. We did find out that the Israeli casualties of civilians to combatants is actually about right for modern urban warfare, although there have been conflicts that have had less casualties, and there have been conflicts that had more casualties. So it's kind of right there in the middle as far as Israeli operations. We also figured out that Hamas had a similar combatant to IDF ratio. However, something that people pointed out in chat was that some of these IDF people could have been reservists, or they could have been people acting in a civilian capacity at the time they were killed, and therefore we don't really have an accurate number there. When it comes to Anna and when it comes to that other guy, they were effectively saying like, well, you know, you're doing apologia for some of the worst humanitarian crimes in the modern era. What the fuck is wrong with you? And they just kind of repeated that over and over again. And then finally, my point is that if the Israelis want to no longer be criticized about Gaza, then they need to have an exfiltration plan. They need to figure out how to rebuild Gaza and get out, or realistically, they just need to rip off the Band-Aid and do some ethnic cleansing, but expect for the whole world, including large swaths of the United States, to not support you. And to not only not support you, there might be a backlash against Israel to the point that the United States doesn't want to support the state of Israel anymore, including me, because I don't support ethnic cleansing. So, you know, I don't care how good of friends we are. You know, ethnic cleansing is cringe. End of rant. Let's engage with chat. I parasocially love you. Thank you. Matthew Mendoza says, Connor, you're my destiny waiting room, and I love it. Well, thank you.